Hi, Algebra 2. Today we are going to be talking about multiplicity on a polynomial function, along with a couple key features that we've already discussed. Now, from the video that I had you watch before this, it was a 6-minute video, and there was some notes there that I took from that video on multiplicity. So multiplicity is when a polynomial equation is written in factored form. It's easier to identify what the multiplicity is. Multiplicity is how often something occurs at one of the x-intercepts, okay? So one of the formulas that he wrote down in the video was a factor of x minus a, and it was to the power of m. That m, it's like if I said x squared, that meant that it's x times x. So the multiplicity just tells me how often that same factor is going to occur. If there is no m value there, we understand it to be 1. Okay, so that exponent is 1 unless otherwise noted. If the multiplicity is odd, the graph is going to cross the x-axis, and if the multiplicity is even, the graph bounces on the x-axis. I've also gone ahead here and drawn 6 graphs just to kind of help me see some similarities or some differences that you are welcome to pause this and write these down on your notes page. But what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to jump into today's practice and start going through it. Now, you have 2 pages, front and back, with a whole bunch of problems. And I want to see that we can at least get through, excuse me, 2 of the pages. And so let's work through that. Okay. All right. So first thing we're going to do is in the top row, it says polynomials in standard form. So that's this whole top row up here. Oh, I'm sorry. You should have the pink paper with you today. So the pink packet is what you're working on. Okay, the yellow one will be one we continue on after we finish this pink one. And what I want to do is I just want to go through this top row of the first 2 pages. Okay, and I've gone ahead and written every one here in standard form. So if you notice the second one is blank, I've written it in right here. So you can just go ahead and write that in standard form on your worksheet. And I've done that for every problem. So I will make sure that you have all of those at your disposal. Okay. So on this first one, well, I want to know the number of zeros, or how many times it's going to cross the x-axis when I graph this function. So in order to determine that, I look for the highest degree. So whatever our highest degree is, that is the number of zeros. Okay. Then I also want to look for the y-intercept. Remember, the y-intercept is the constant term in this equation. Well, in this case, the constant term is 0. So our y-intercept is 0, 0. Then I also want to know if this graph is going to open up, or I'm sorry, if this graph is going to end up pointing up or down on the right side. And that all depends on the a value. Okay? If the a value is negative, then the right side is going to point down. If the a value is positive, then the right side is going to point up. In this case, the a value is negative, so the right side is going to point down. Okay, so those 3 pieces we're going to go do for each of these equations on the first 2 pages. Okay. All right, so on this first one, looking at, or the second graph, second column, fill in this equation. F of x is equal to x cubed plus 6x squared plus 9x. Okay. How many zeros are there going to be? Well, the 0 is determined by the largest degree. So the largest degree is 3. So the number of zeros that there's going to be is 3 zeros. Okay. The y-intercept on this one is that constant term. The constant term is 0 in this case. So again, our y-intercept is 0, 0. Okay. Our a value, the term in front of x to the third, is a positive 1. Positives are increasing on the right side. Okay, so if it's a positive a, it's increasing. The last one was a negative a, so it was decreasing on the right side. I'm just thinking about the right side here. I'm not talking about the left side right now. Okay. All right, going over to the third column on this first page. This one here, how many zeros are there? Again, look for the highest degree. and that's how many zeros or how many x-intercepts there's going to be. What's our y-intercept? In this case, our y-intercept is positive 2. So that means x is 0 and y is 2. Okay. Our a value is a positive 1. So that means the right side of the graph is going to open up. Okay. And now let's go to the last one on this page. Okay. Zeros. How many zeros are on this one? Well, what's our highest degree? Our highest degree is 2. So the number of zeros is 2. Our y-intercept on this one is positive 16. And our a value is positive. So that means that the right side of the graph is going to be pointing up. Okay. All right, let's flip over and go to the second page and do the same thing again on that top row of that second page. Okay. So on this page here, you do have 3 blank boxes, but like I said, I did go ahead and fill them out. So go ahead and pause this video, fill in these 3 empty boxes in the first row, and then we'll look over those pieces there. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I want to identify the number of zeros. Well, again, looking at the degree, the highest degree is 4. So the number of zeros that we're going to have, or the number of x-intercepts we're going to have, is 4. Okay. The y-intercept, where will it cross the y-axis? Well, there is no constant value, so that means our constant term is 0. So our y-intercept is 0, 0. Then I'm looking at our a value in front of the highest degree. Our a value is negative, which means the right side of the graph is going to point down. Okay. All right, go ahead and try these next 3. See if you can find the 0, the y-intercepts, and if the right side is going to open up or down. So pause the video, try these 3 here, and then come back and let's look at those answers. All right, so looking at the second column, just doing the first row. We have not gone on to anything else yet. So the number of zeros on this one, okay, is 4. Okay. My y-intercept on this second column is going to be 0, 0. And since a is positive, the right side of the graph is going to point up. Okay. All right. On the third equation here, the highest degree is 3. So the number of zeros I will have is 3. The y-intercept, there is not a constant term, so it must be 0. And the a value is positive, so the right side will open up. Okay. All right. Looking, excuse me, looking at this last one on this second page, the number of zeros is the highest exponent, so that'll be 2 zeros. Okay. The y-intercept on this one is 0, 5. And since the a value is negative, the right side of the graph will open down. Okay. All right, so just going over those 3 things, I want to make sure that you are comfortable with the zeros, the x-intercepts, the zeros, which are the x-intercepts, the y-intercept, and then whether the right side of the graph is going to open up or down. Now, determining whether it's going to open up or down, that was on the notes from Wednesday. Okay, so if you didn't watch those, you need to go back and catch up on those because that is still a graded assignment. Okay, all right, I'm going to go back to the first page, and now we're going to be looking at polynomials in factored form. Okay, so I'm actually going to work backwards here. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be looking at the multiplicity column. And I'm going to look at I'm going to kind of use these clues to help me figure out what's missing. Okay, so this first box that they give us is completely filled in. They wrote the polynomial in factored form. They told us what the multiplicity is. They told us the left side opens up and the right side goes down, and they even graphed it for us. Okay. Now, when we're looking at the second one, excuse me, on the second one, they have already factored it for us. They looked at it and they said that x to the third plus 6x squared plus 9x, we can factor out an x out of all of them. So they did bring an x out front. Okay. So we've got x, and then they had x plus 3. So when they did that, they had x, and then they would have had x squared plus 6x plus 9. And when they factored that x squared plus 6x plus 9, like if we were using the diamond method, we would have, let me box in this y-intercept so it's out of our way. So we would have x times x plus 3 times x plus 3. And this just means we have 2 copies of them, so they wrote it as x plus 3 squared. Okay. So when they're factoring, they're looking for what is the GCF and how can I break this up to be a bunch of smaller factors that will help me find the multiplicity. So in this case, this is really saying x times x plus 3 times x plus 3. Okay. Now, if I wanted to actually solve it, remember that we set all of this equal to 0. So on this first one, we've got x equals 0. So that would be one of our factors. On the next one, where it's x plus 3, that means x equals negative 3. That's another one of our factors. And then on this third one, it's x plus 3, but when we solve it for x, we get negative 3. Okay, so we said we're going to have 3 zeros in that very first box on top, and now we see that there are 3 zeros. Okay, so that's what we're trying to figure out, is where are those zeros. So now I have one of my zeros is 0, so I'm going to put that here. And it only has a multiplicity of 1. It means it only happens one time. The other 0 that I have is negative 3. And it happens 2 times. So his multiplicity is 2. Okay. All right. So now let's go over to the third column and work on the multiplicity. Now, this one here, I'm going to work backwards. Rather than using the first box to factor it to get to here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these zeros and I'm going to move them up here. Okay, so instead of x equals negative 2, there's one of them, and there's one multiplicity of that. Then I have x equals 1, and that happens twice because the multiplicity is twice. Okay. When we move the negative 2 over to that side, we get a factor of x plus 2. We get a factor of x minus 1. And we get a factor of x minus 1. Okay, so those are our factors. Now, since x minus 1 is duplicated and x plus 2 is not, I'm just going to write x plus 2 just once. And then I'm going to have x minus 1. But since there's 2 copies of it, I'm going to put it as squared. Okay. So that there is our polynomial in factored form. All right. Now, looking at the fourth column on this first page, this one here does not give us any multiplicity or anything, so we are going to have to factor that problem. Okay. So what we're going to be doing is I'm going to go ahead and go with the diamond method that we used. Okay. What multiplies to 16 but adds to 8? All right, and we know that would be 4 and 4. Okay. So what we would end up with is x plus 4 times x plus 4. Okay. 2 copies of x plus 4. That gives me x plus 4 squared. Okay, so that is our factored form there. Now, to find the multiplicity, what does x equal? Well, if I have x plus 4, okay, if I set it equal to 0, then what I find is that x actually equals negative 4. Okay, and since there's 2 of them, because it's doubled because it's squared, then we've got x equals negative 4, and it happens twice, so the multiplicity is 2. Okay, so we're working with factoring, but sometimes they give us the multiplicity and we've got to find the factors. Sometimes they give us the polynomial and we've got to factor it. Okay, so we've just got to kind of work through this. Okay, all right, so now let's go to the back of this page and let's try the next 4 on that page. Okay, all right, on this one here. Okay. Now, there's a lot going on here. I know there's going to be 4 zeros. When I look here, though, I only see room for 3. So that means one of them has to be doubled. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I am going to take negative x to the 4th minus 5x third. And I'm going to group those together. And then I have negative 3x squared plus 9x. Okay. And we could factor it that way. However, like I said, we're going to see if there's other stuff on the bottom that kind of gives us some information. So on this one here, let's go ahead and take a chance and go all the way to the bottom. Okay. Let's look at the graph on this one. All right. So looking at the graph on this one, what do you notice about the left side of the graph? Well, the left side of the graph is pointing down. Okay. What about the right side of the graph? Oh, it's also pointing down. Okay. So remember, if they're pointing, oops, I circled the wrong thing here. They're both pointing down. So when they're both pointing the same direction, that means that there's going to be an even degree. And since they're both pointing down, that means A is going to be negative. Okay. Now, to look for the x-intercepts, just look for where it touches or crosses the x-axis. This one touches the x-axis at negative 3. And this is where it bounces. So that means it happens 2 times there. Okay. Then it crosses at 0. Okay. That's crosses, so that means it's only going to happen once there. And then it crosses at positive 1. Means it's only going to happen once there. So when I'm looking at the multiplicity, I have x equals negative 3. And because it bounces, it happens twice. At 0, it crosses, so it happens an odd number of times. And then at positive 1, it also crosses, and that happens 1 time. Make sure that this number here adds up to the degree that you had in your original polynomial. Okay, so we have a degree of 4 here, and we had a degree of 4 here. Okay. All right, so now rather than having to factor all of this stuff, I'm going to go ahead and just cross this out because working backwards for me was easier on this one. I know that I'm going to have x plus 3, and there's 2 copies of that, because when I move this negative 3 over to the other side, it becomes a positive 3. Okay. And then I'm going to do the 1 first. Okay, so then I'm going to have x minus 1. And when I have x equals 0, well, then that's just x. Okay, so that's my factored form on that one. All right. So now looking at this next one, they give me the multiplicity already. And what I want to do is just kind of write it out in factored form. So this first one, I'm going to take the -4 and move it to the other side. So I've got x plus 4. The multiplicity on that one is 1, so I don't need to put 1 as an exponent. Then I have x is equal to 0, so I can just put an x out front because x, that just means that x is by itself. And then I have x minus 5. And x minus 5. Okay, but that's only 3, and I said I'm supposed to have 4, so I must have missed something. So -4 has a multiplicity of 1. X equals 0 has a multiplicity of 2, so then this x should be squared. Okay. All right, and then x minus 5 has a multiplicity of 1. Okay. All right. I'm going to go ahead and skip number 3 on this one at this point. Nothing with you guys. It's just that I'm still feeling kind of under the weather, so I don't want to make a mistake somewhere there, which I know I will because my mind's still kind of tired. All right, so let's go to this next one. Okay, the 4th column on this second page. On this one here, again, I'm going to start with the graph on this one, okay? I'm going to use the graph to help me kind of work backwards. My first x-intercept is at -1, and it crosses at -1, okay? So the first one is x equals -1. The next one is at 5, and it crosses, so x equals 5. Since they've both crossed, they're going to happen an odd number of times. Okay. And the reason that I know it's 1 and 1 is because my degree is 2. So these two here add up to a degree of 2, the multiplicity. Okay. Move this -1 to the other side, and I've got x plus 1. And I've got x minus 5. Okay. All right. So once we've got that, and that does just take practice, the last thing that we need to do now is going back to seeing if we can graph some of these, okay, and if we can find any missing pieces that we haven't done yet. So let's go back to the first page. Okay. So on the first page, looking at the second column, what is the left side of the graph doing? Well, the left side is going down. The right side of the graph is pointing up. Okay. This one here, the third column, it tells us that the left side is going to point down and that the right side is going to point up. We know that we have multiplicity or x-intercepts or zeros at -2 and at 1. Okay. At -2, it's going to cross. And at 1, because it's an even, it's going to bounce. So cross and bounce. The right side is going to open up. Okay, so this side's going to open up. And the left side is going to open down. The right side, or the left side's going to cross. And the right side's going to bounce. Okay. We can also check that our y-intercept was 0, 2, and that's right about estimation of where 0, 2 is for the y-intercept. Okay. All right. Last one on this page. Okay, this one here, we have that the only x-intercept is at -4. Okay. The a value is positive, so we said that the right side is going to open up. I'm sorry, the degree is even, and the a value is positive, so both sides are going to point the same direction and open up. Okay. The y-intercept on this one is going to be 0, 16, so that's somewhere way up there. And since there's a multiplicity of 2, that means it's going to bounce right there. Okay. All right. And let's go on to the second page and see how much we can get done there. Okay. So on this second one, again, I did say we were going to go ahead and skip this one. Okay. On this one, we've got the y-intercept is at 0, 0. So it's going to cross the y-axis at 0, 0. Now I got to go look at all the x-intercepts. At -4. Okay, so at -4, it happens once, so that means it's going to cross. At 0, it happens twice, so that means it's going to bounce. And at 5, it happens once, so that means it's going to cross. Okay. The left side of the graph is going to open up, so I can take this last point, point it up. The right side of the graph is going to point up. Okay. They tell us that they're both going to cross. It's going to bounce and do something along that nature. Okay. And you can always check those on Desmos as well to see if your graph looks correct. Now, you have 2 more pages on here that I want you to go through and then just practice some of these skills. Look at some of them and saying, what pieces can I do? What pieces can I become comfortable with? And then practice those, okay? If it's the zeros or the x-intercepts or trying to find those multiplicity, all right? And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Send me a message on Remind, and I hope to see you all soon.